CBS, they've got the rights to this whole bad boy. They also get the first opportunity to question Charles McClellan, the chairperson of the 2024 NCAA men's tournament and the selection committee. And he had some interesting answers, Aaron. We're going to hear his thoughts on how the bid stealers played a part in all of this, and also how they came upon the number one seeds. Number one overall was UConn. That really wasn't a question. But there was a question when we started this program 2 hours ago about who would get that final number one seed. In the end, I don't think it was surprising, but it was North Carolina. I thought Arizona had a chance to do so, but to put Arizona as the 2 seed in the West region with the Tar Heels.
Yeah, somebody who was at the Pac-12 tournament this week, I don't want to speak for Arizona fans, but I think the big concern was just get us in the West. Are we a 2? Are we a 1? It doesn't matter. It does set up the interesting thing that you brought up earlier, Dan, of North Carolina being the 1 seed, but if both teams were to advance to Los Angeles, North Carolina would have a very big home court disadvantage, if you will. Why that is, we'll hear what the committee has to say and all that. But were you gonna say something?
Yeah, no, like with that, and honestly, like I could even change my tune because I thought it would just be tough to convince North Carolina fans of this situation. How, if you are a North Carolina fan, are you happy with this in possibly playing an Elite Eight game in front of an opposing crowd?
Yep.
And I realized as I was getting my bag of Cheetos from the vending machine down the hall.
That's where you do your best thinking. That's where we all do our best thinking.
That it was truly the only way. Because think about it this way. If you did go my original route, which I'm fine with admitting that I was wrong, if you put Arizona as the number 1 seed in the West, what North Carolina would say was, not only did you put us behind a school that we felt we were better than in Arizona, but you put us out West. Their saving grace is they get the 1 seed path.
But why did Arizona have to be a 2 seed in the West? That's and maybe there's a reason, and maybe the way the bracket lines up, they were considered to be the first 2 seed, North Carolina the last 1. Maybe that's it. But there was no rule requiring Arizona to be in the West region. You know what I mean?
No, I know. Yeah, exactly. I get it. I think that they do try to lessen travel. I also think that they don't want 2 East Coast teams playing a game in LA.
What it really is.
Yeah, like when you think of other seasons and what the western part of this country is, you could have had a Gonzaga, Arizona, right? In most years, UCLA, Gonzaga. How many times were those schools playing? Arizona's been, high seed at times. They ran into Wisconsin, a couple of times out here. And so you have like these matchups, but you just couldn't have it where you had your biggest matchups. And I mean, even to the fact of the matter of St. Mary's, let's just say St. Mary's makes a run to the Sweet 16. They go through Spokane. St. Mary's isn't a big enough school to have the following that it would dwarf what North Carolina would have. Like there would be St. Mary fans more so in a West Region game in LA than say East Region in Boston, but it's not anything that would be overwhelming. I still would want the path, and I don't think that you can penalize Arizona just to appease the number 1
seed, yeah.
Because it throws the 2 seeds, quite honestly, Aaron, set up pretty nicely in terms of like how it plays out. Marquette ends up getting the 2 seed in the South, a little bit there, but Arizona's the 2 seed in the West. In the Midwest, it ends up being Tennessee. That's not too far from Detroit. So like you've got like it's not too shabby. I mean, in terms of travel wise, Iowa State would have to go out, and UConn's got that huge advantage with Boston, but. Yeah, I think because of the fan aspect of it, they didn't want an empty arena.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any doubt, and they would never say that publicly, but I think that's why it is. By the way, we are getting some reaction. Providence coach Kim English.
Is he single, by the way?
I don't know. Why are you asking?
Did you see that?
No.
You were busy. Somebody asked him what his marital status was last week.
Oh, really?
In a post-game press conference.
Really?
Yes.
Is this like one of those Inez signs or whatever?
No, it was It was just wrong. Yeah, it was ridiculous. But I'm sorry. What did Kim English have to say?
No, he had a very similar quote to something, but he said, I think the analytics are bull something. And, that is a team that lost one of their best players early, played in the Big East. And I think these Big East coaches are going to be very outspoken. I think everybody thought they're getting a minimum of 4, probably 5. Villanova was probably out after this week. Providence probably needed to beat Marquette, although at this point, who even knows? I think everybody thought St. John's was going to be in, and then Seton Hall was probably in that conversation to go from everybody thinking there's 5, maybe 6 to 3. I hate to keep bringing up the point, Dan. I'm sorry. It's not the UConn bias in me kicking in, but this was the number 2 conference according to Ken Pomeroy. This was a conference that everybody has agreed is special all year, and I think we're going to get a lot of reaction between Pitino, Shaheen Holloway, Kim English, the commissioner, and more.
I think a lot of conferences are mad because of the bid stealers. Like, honestly, Aaron, when you look at this, I'm wondering if it's the weakest bracket we have seen.
Could be, no doubt.
Because of the bid stealing aspect, because there were better teams that were left out. And I'll tell you, and it's something that we can get into in a little bit here, but you want to talk about a push for 72 or 76.
Yeah.
This is the weekend that it happens. Like,
You're
this
right.
of coming off the heels of that. I'm actually, for as much as I can be old school and set in my ways, I can accept a 72 or 76 team tournament field. I don't think it's going to mess up our bracket pools like we think that it could. And we've already got 68, and like we figure out a way to make it work. I think you just have more basketball on Tuesday and Wednesday, which isn't a bad thing. I think that this sort of breakthrough forces now the NCAA, gives Greg Sankey and maybe those ammunition to say, and Greg Sankey was looked at as the bad guy, the evil empire in wanting to take up all these spots. But now if you have the Kim English and the Providences of the world and the Big East and all these other schools saying, like, yeah, this is garbage, doesn't that open it up to a 72, 76 team field?
You could look at it one of two ways. So I don't disagree. I do wonder if it's solely because of the bid stealing. If those 4 teams, so let's say Florida Atlantic wins the AAC, Arizona wins the Pac-12, North Carolina wins the ACC, and what's the 4th one? I can't, not New Mexico.
Dayton.
But Dayton wins the A10. Then all of a sudden Oklahoma's in, Seton Hall's in, whoever, and we're really only talking about St. John's. So, by the way, I'm not necessarily in favor of tournament expansion, but I do think if you're just adding a game or 2 to that Tuesday, Wednesday field, it's not the worst thing in the world. But I wonder if this year will be the push that ends up getting it. I still, and forgive me for reiterating some of the points I made in hour 2 when the bracket came out at 6 Eastern, I'm as upset with some of the seeding within the bracket. Michigan State being in an 8-9 spot, there's just nothing on the resume that reflects that they should be. I mean, the Big Ten was down this year. We thought they were potentially a bubble team. Now you're looking at them, in their current position of being in a 9 seed in the West region. Florida Atlantic, I think when you really break down the resume, it's probably not as strong as people think. They're the 8 seed in the East. I just don't think it was a solid job across the board by the committee, unless ultimately all the metrics that we think they're using, all the metrics that the Jerry Palms and the Joe Lenardis and the Mike DeCourcy's use, were not as important as we thought they were.
But if we're now celebrating the Mountain West and their success, like, think of the flip side. Like, I'm just trying to look at if, let's just say, Boise State, Colorado State.
But real quick, is it success if all of those teams are misseeded in the eyes of the people who do this stuff on a day-to-day basis? So all 6 got in, but if 4 of them, minimum, feel like they were misseeded. Nobody had, Colorado State. Nobody had Boise as one of the last 4 in. Nobody had Nevada as essentially one of the last 8 in. Nobody had New Mexico as a team that needed to win yesterday. Maybe that's the one where whatever. But I think you could call it a success story because they got 6 teams in. But if 4 of the 6 feel like they were completely misseeded once they got there, then, I don't know if it's as big of a success as you'd think.
Beggars can't be choosers, though. In terms of, like, you look at the alternative of where St. John's and Pitt and Oklahoma, like,
But none of those teams were really in the position that St. John's and Oklahoma were in, except for New Mexico if they didn't win yesterday.
Sure, but the point, and maybe we're talking about two different things because you're talking about seeding. My point is if the Mountain West Conference only has 3 schools in, and we're looking at the last 4 in, or the first 4 out as being Colorado State, Boise State, and Utah State was an 8 seed. Let's use them as an example. Maybe not a good example because of how well they fared during the year. The point being is we're saying, how can you leave the Mountain West out? Like, look at this.
You're right.
What are we doing here? Like, it's just a big boys club. You might as well go off and start your own tournament. Here, the Mountain West had exciting basketball all season long, and Boise State and Colorado State are sitting there on the outside looking in. Like, you're in, and I know you're in a first 4, but you're in, and I think that Oklahoma and Pitt and Indiana State would in a heartbeat trade their places for where they are right now.
There are some surprises though. Virginia being in, I was very surprised by them. TCU, I thought again they're another team that ended up on that 8-9 line. Very surprised by some of the decisions of these bubble teams.
Let's hear a bit from Charles McClellan, who did speak with CBS Sports after the bracket was revealed. And first, let's get his take on North Carolina. Again, North Carolina, the final number 1 seed. They were in the West region. North Carolina gets the 1. Arizona ends up getting the 2 in the West. Iowa State gets a 2 in the East in UConn's region. This is Charles McClellan talking about the Tar Heels getting that number 1.
I want to know, how much kerfuffle was there in Carmel over that 4th 1 seed?
There was a lot of discussion. Obviously, North Carolina got it. We looked at some head-to-heads with Tennessee, but overall, North Carolina had a magnificent season. They did what they were supposed to do in the regular season, fell a little short in the tournament, and that's ultimately why we gave them that number 4 line seed on the number 1. The number 1 seed on the 4th line.
So, interesting comments there in saying that North Carolina, if they would have won the ACC tournament, actually could have moved up maybe higher than a Purdue in that Purdue being the third overall seed.
That's another one I don't really get. Purdue, I've been critical of Purdue, but out of conference, and we won't, I'm not going to give all the metrics, but beat Alabama on a neutral, beat Arizona on a neutral, beat Tennessee on a neutral, beat Marquette on a neutral. They probably still had the strongest resume overall, especially if we're now considering that UConn basically played in a mid-major league in the Big East because they only got 3 teams. So it's like that would be surprising to me if we didn't have Purdue as one of those top 3 teams from throughout the season, just because they did have a great resume, even if some people kind of question some of the basketball stuff like I do.
Like it or don't like it, Zach Edey, we talk so much about Caitlin Clark, he'd be the face of college basketball. People know Zach Edey. They know his size. They know who he is. And, there's number 1 seed, and they're going to draw attention in that Midwest region. Number 1 seed playing in Indianapolis coming up on Friday and Sunday. Here's one other point by Charles McClellan in talking about another potential number 1 seed. That was Iowa State. And the only reason I bring this up is because when they asked about North Carolina, and you heard Adam Zucker in that question there asking about the Tar Heels, he only mentioned the Tennessee angle of it, of them going head-to-head and North Carolina winning. But he did bring it up as a point, didn't necessarily address Arizona or Iowa State, but this is what likely hurt Iowa State, putting them as a 2 seed despite winning the Big 12 tournament.
A very difficult process, Clark, and ironically, it wasn't 4 teams, it was 5 because the Mountain West actually got a bid with New Mexico coming in. So when you start talking about the selections process, this is the first time since I've been on the committee that we've had 5 bids that have been stolen.
That's a little different cut. It's all right. We'll get the other Iowa State one. He was talking about the bid stealers in that scenario.
No, and listen, and that, I can have a big gripe with Seton Hall or St. John's or even in Indiana State being out, but the committee is right. 5 teams we're talking about that, if you include New Mexico, which many thought would have been in, but they clearly would not have been in. Those are 5 teams that stole bids that wouldn't have normally otherwise.
And I can tell you, because I heard what Charles McClellan said about Iowa State, it's what you talked about earlier in the show. Their non-conference schedule and who they didn't play earlier on in the season did not allow them the opportunity to advance past. And by the way, they're in UConn's region. So of the number 2 seeds, they got the toughest spot. Now, how they get there and can all play out. But as we look at it on paper of 1 and 2, they're in the toughest region if you're just taking the top 2 seeds.
No doubt. Two wins against Houston if you include both the regular season and yesterday. But I thought it was a little bit of a tougher argument than you. I know we talked about it earlier in the show. I thought it was a little bit of a tougher argument, but you're still a 2 seed. You still got a chance to make a run.